Chiefs Kingdom, welcome into the AP Breakdown. Yes, we are back. It's Ron Kopp Jr., contributing editor at arrowheadpride.com. Thank you so much for joining me. Big win. Go Chiefs, baby. We're 6-5, 23-20 overtime victory over the Colts. Huge win in the AFC playoff picture, obviously, to keep them alive. And, man, there's so many takeaways from this game, right? Shout out Kareem Hunt, 30 rushes, career high. Shout out the defense for shutting down the other running back, Jonathan Taylor. So many ways you can go in this game. But if you've been following me, if you know me, I just know my offense and especially the quarterback position pretty well. I like talking about it, and I do think there's a really interesting, story from this game in terms of the quarterback position, in terms of Patrick Mahomes going against Lou Anarumo. We saw some of the same struggles maybe, and we'll go over it. We're about to get into it, but we saw some of the same things that maybe haunted us in the past when Matt Mahomes would match up with him in Cincinnati, and he was the defensive coordinator there. But he overcame it. That's the thing. They finished strong. It's the title of the show, this episode. The Chiefs pass offense finished strong, and you can give credit to the running game for really keeping them in it, the defense for keeping them in it. But then Patrick Mahomes, MV Pat, finally showed back up, fourth quarter. Go check my Twitter timeline if you're curious how many stats or what his stats were in the fourth quarter and overtime, because I have a few stats numbers on that where it was pretty egregious. 39% of his passing yards for the game came after the 4-minute mark, or 4-minute and 37 mark, 37-second mark in the fourth quarter. So obviously a great finish to the game for Mahomes. But let's get into it. Let's start chronologically. It's going to be a chronological kind of show. Just going through the whole game. So buckle up. Hope everyone is ready for, a good show and looking at a lot of things. And then kind of just going to let it run here at first because, I could show you the RPO interception, that screwed the Chiefs right out the gate. But I just feel like we all saw what happened. Colts, that's the thing with the Lou Anarumo defense. They were coached very well and they're trained up very well to face this Chiefs offense, to face this RPO-centric offense. And you saw it right away, with Latu being able to read Mahomes' eyes, not only, kind of keep himself, tight to the line of scrimmage with his long arms. He was also, able to get a hand up, batted up, Mahomes trying to go to a slant across the middle off that RPO look. And it was an interception, set up the Colts really easily for their first touchdown of the day. But this is right after that, we're getting back into the game. And, the reason I circled this defender here is you're going to see this a lot today with what the Colts were doing on defense. They were really just somehow, some way, and it was a lot of times this maybe backside or weak side linebacker. He's really going to be a middle of the field defender, and he's really going to kind of be the person that Mahomes wants to kind of read and understand, okay, where he is not, I need to go with the ball. And so I circle him here because I do think if Mahomes reads him pretty well, sees how much he's influenced to, this left side of the field, Kelsey's coming open over here, this flat defender, I think it's Sauce right here. Sauce is pretty, that's dangerous throw, with Sauce maybe underneath, or it's Charvarius, who played a good game. We're going to see Charvarius have some few good reps, tonight in this breakdown. But again, I just think that's kind of, it was a theme of the game. And this was a great check down. That's, you maybe a little bit more in rhythm, but get the ball to Kareem and let him get a first down, which is what he does here. But again, I think Mahomes had the pocket here where, and this is it's an up and down theme from the game. It was especially prevalent in the first half, but again, I think Anarumo really does cause Mahomes to be uncomfortable. He changes things up. And so here, off of that check down, here's a more confident kind of a go-to play for them, right? It's going to be kind of a high-low look where you're putting stress on number 44 here with these two routes on a trip side, where this guy, Xavier Worthy, is going to go across the middle, kind of on that dig route, where Rice is going to go, he's going to try to catch 44's eyes, come underneath. And if 44 is really attached to him, which, right, 44 definitely, goes that way, Mahomes kind of influences him with a pump fake. You're going to see Worthy pop open because of that across the middle. And great finish by Worthy here. We talk about, I think in the past, or I think at times, this season, you see that the Chiefs almost try to protect Worthy with maybe how they utilize him. Don't necessarily want to put him in positions to take these kind of hits. but he can take them. I mean, right? I mean, he can catch this pass over the middle. This is a a safety is kind of bearing down on him. Kind of sees it coming to an extent. Great tackle by the safety, but good play by Xavier Worthy there. So again, that was a more kind of a go-to pass look, and the Chiefs got him in the right look, and Mahomes just confidently fired away. So good pass there, but then you're going to see here just trying to get Brashard Smith on the angle route, which I love. I love this little design right here. You got the 3-by-1 look. Kelsey's going to go vertical, kind of take maybe that, as much of the threat away as possible. So, when this middle of the field over here is as spread out as possible, Brashard could have really had a lane going here if he wasn't held up by 53 a little bit. Hey, I mean, I feel like that was probably what that was, but Brashard does need to. He's a rookie, and that's a good learning experience for him. Like, we'll run that back real quick. I know it's an irrelevant play, but like rookie running back, rookie player in general as a receiver, when the ball's in the air, you want to run through this contact and really sell that, right? I think if Brashard really tries harder to get to that ball when it's in the air, maybe the flag does get thrown for him, and maybe you do get a little bit of a relief there. But he actually gets the ball this next play. And this is going to be one where I think Mahomes kind of maybe went to the check down a little quick, but he also realized that Brashard had him outflanked. So I think that is also smart on Mahomes' part, right? Where you're going to see he recognizes the flat defender. He recognizes the linebacker up here. They're both outflanked. So it's like an easy pitch and catch. Brashard Smith doesn't have to make a move to get a first down. But I did highlight up top where you do have Noah Gray kind of getting into this middle of the field, abandoning the zone where, he did have the pocket where if he wanted to, he could have hung in there real quick, recognized. And again, this is where it comes down to reading the middle of the field defenders, reading hips, reading shoulders. I think if he really takes the second to read 44's intentions, right? Ball's not, he's reading down, 44 is giving himself, to that side of the field before 15 is necessarily going to that side of the field. He's looking that way, but he can chill, and he could have went backside on this play. But again, he saw Brashard without flanking those guys and got it to him real quick. So that's a good first down, good catch and run, get him going. Here's a play that really reminds me oh man, of the 2021 AFC Championship. And I did tweet this one out and then figured, shoot, I better save this all up for the live stream. All right, so I'm circling number 44 here, the linebacker. Colts are going to deploy a zone coverage defense where, an aggressive zone coverage. I think in the NFL and in the red zone, when you deploy a zone coverage, it's sticky, right? You're kind of almost manning up the guy that comes into your zone. And so there's a lot of anticipation with that if you're a defender. Number 44 is anticipating this, a route coming underneath here, right? He can almost feel it coming. And it is Rice from the outside, wanting to sneak under here. Mahomes wants to go to that. He's in perfect position, 44 is to defend it. And Mahomes, to his credit, recognizes it's not the right place to go with the ball. You wish he would have maybe recognized it a little quicker. He doesn't necessarily have to pump fake all the way and kind of lose his throwing form. I think that's what happens here is he maybe does kind of, the pump fake does kind of almost take him out of his throwing platform and mess up his footwork, where you'd really like to see him, stay within himself after the pump fake, just come back. And here's the kicker: this is the play before Travis Kelce's touchdown run that got called off the board. Travis Kelce was wide open, and you're going to see that. Yes, there are players near him per se when he first breaks open, per se. But watch Xavier Worthy's route from the slot over here. Watch what it does to the other defenders around Kelce. They are scrambling, trying to figure out, trying to make sure he doesn't get all the way to the corner of the end zone, trying not to, break open into, space, forgetting about 87 here. And again, 44, it's 44 and 53 are kind of patrolling the middle of the field. 53 recognizes, what's coming across the field. 44 really is just kind of, making an anticipatory play here. And look, it works out for him in terms of Mahomes is late getting back to 87. If Mahomes is quicker getting back to Travis, it's an easy touchdown, right? Because again, if we just watch where Mahomes is, boom. If he's right back to Kelce here, again, if he doesn't lose his footwork, this is where it reminds me of the 2021 AFC Championship. We saw it in the red zone a ton against Louisiana, rushing light packages, right? Only 4 or 3 people. Deploying as much zone coverage as possible and just making tight windows and just making Mahomes uncomfortable. He does tend to say, oh shoot, I gotta make the windows myself. I gotta scramble out and make the scramble drill. Make windows. Open up the windows. Myself. I don't. I can't trust the scheme. But sometimes you do have to trust the scheme. And this is a great example of that. Because, again, I think it's just a great example of what Xavier Worthy does for this offense. You think it's just when it's between the 20s. Look, in the red zone, even when he's taking off down the field, look at all those Colts defenders back all the way up past the goal line, trying to, make sure Xavier Worthy doesn't beat them. So missed opportunity there. Again, the face mask call on Javon Taylor, which, I think was clearly just not the right call. I think you're not, I get where he grabbed, there was some movement on the helmet, and I think that's where it gets called and the flag kind of gets triggered. But I think we can all agree that, you wish that wasn't called. You wish Travis got that touchdown. He had 2 opportunities to get that touchdown, as I just showed. So now we're going to get to the end of this red zone drive, and this is going to be a theme of this night tonight, right? We're going to talk about a lot of red zone failures, and we're going to talk about maybe failures against man coverage, which this is an example of as well. We're going to get the deep crossers where Xavier Worthy is actually probably the one, that if any of them, is the one to think about because he's the shorter of the crossers. He's underneath, and you see that this one high, kind of this safety here, which it is a one high safety technically because that strong safety does come underneath and hit and attack the flat. The one high safety here, because that strong safety is coming up, he patrols the middle of the field. He's kind of looking at Kelsey, right? This is what Kelsey can do in the red zone, and it's smart on the Colts' part to think about Kelsey over the middle right here. Strong safety's occupied with him, and with that, Worthy does have a chance, maybe to separate, but he doesn't separate. That's the problem, is he doesn't separate against Travarius Ward. Travarius, does not let Pat feel good about that throw, right? You can kind of see he's wanting, and then he knows he may have Hollywood, but by the time he gets there, the pressure is going to get there because it is a 5-man rush, if I recall. Yes, and the Colts did this a few times in crucial situations where, really well executed stunt, right, where 44, usually an off-ball linebacker, is all the way up on the line of scrimmage, outside the guard. He's going to loop around and get to the other B gap, and really that just messes up the Chiefs' protection when Pat does try to scramble out, right? He's like, shoot, I have Hollywood on the other crosser. I can just scramble out and maybe get it to him. Nope, we have an off-ball linebacker chasing you down, and so he has to kick the field goal here. And that was just, again, we all saw it was a theme of this game, man, not being able to finish red zone drives. And so, we're going to go on with the rest of this game here, the rest of the half, the first half, because I think this is where Pat just continued to kind of just be up and down. I mean, there were times where, and you're going to see it right away, I think on this set of clips, there were times where he was checking down, getting it to the right player when he needed to, right? So like here, you're just going to see how the Colts just kind of have it muddied up. Not necessarily a lot of places you'd love to go with the ball. So yeah, get it to Kareem and let him get the first down. So this is a good, quick decision by Pat too, I would say. I do think he struggles with just like the timing of checkdowns. Like you can even see kind of here, he's, the footwork is, just a little uncomfortable as he gets it over there. There are a lot of times a check down, the best you can make them a lot of it if you do, do it. Wow, that footwork was awkward. You can make a lot of it if you get the right timing on it, right? And so, but again, that was a good one. And here's another check down where I think this is where, it's just a really good play by Travarius, and this is where it makes a difference. Having talented players, a long corner like this in a zone coverage scheme, we're gonna have this deep cross, right? This deep over. And I believe it's Juju, yes. So Juju is going to come all the way over. And Mahomes doesn't necessarily wait for it or anything, right? But I think Travarius just does such a good job of getting depth here. But also he is able to come up. Clyde gives him a little shimmy, but, only 6 yards on the check down. So, Travarius just kind of patrols that side of the field really well here on this play. And pressure here is another part of this where, kind of a long drawn out pass protection. Mahomes can't necessarily, hold on to it forever. So he gets it out to a check down. But again, you just see that the Colts defense is just doing all game. They're doing a good job of making things hard where Xavier Worthy is pushing these safeties deep. You kind of this is exactly what you want to happen in terms of this safety is just bailing, and all of a sudden Juju is coming open. But Charvarius, I think, is able to get depth here enough, plays this really well. He is, if the pass is going to him, he has this covered, to an extent where Pat doesn't necessarily feel comfortable. And that's where you already see him coming to check down here. He sees it's not necessarily there. Yeah, no, the Colts defense deserves a lot of credit for the reasons Pat, did play uncomfortably or has played uncomfortably. I should say Lou Anarumo's defenses, I think, even the Cincinnati, it's not a super talented group. Obviously, they just got Sauce Gardner right at the cornerback position. But they just know how to play ball. And it makes Pat uncomfortable where he misses open plays like this, where, I tweeted this one where he just runs into the spy. I think it's sometimes where Pat just goes into like, okay, I can make this guy miss. Because, yeah, if you do make the spy miss, like, it's great because he's the one responsible for you. So, you could make a huge play out of making the spy miss. But you also could recognize that, man, you have a 3-man rush, because the spy is chilling. You're not going to get him rushing. So it's a 3-man rush. And so if you just hang in there and read it out, Rice is breaking open across the middle. He has a step on Charvarius Ward, and that spy is not in your way at all in terms of making that throw, right? If he just chills in the pocket right here, which we'll go to the end zone angle too, there's no reason he can't make this throw. And this was 3rd and 9, so this was a crucial spot in the first half where you want to see him just, there's no reason, right? You're dropping back, boom. It's Rice. Look where the spy is and look where Rice already is. This throw should be out. No problem. No, it really, this is just where, Rice is you get the ball in his hands, it, like it's one of your best playmakers. Like that just feels like a pretty like easy money decision, and it just doesn't happen, doesn't work out there. Pat just kind of, again, I think that's where Lou Anarumo's defense gets a lot of credit. They just mess with Pat a little bit on his eyes and what he wants to look for. But got to give Kelsey some credit for the plays he was making. Comes off delayed release, gives Nick Cross a little what's up, gives him a little shimmy hey. This is a nice little route by Kelsey. And that's why he's a safety valve where, like the timing with him and Pat, like, he's not going to create separation too much after that move he just made, and he does juggle the ball, but Pat's putting it on him as soon as he is going to be open because he understands his timing, his rhythm. That's why he is the ultimate safety valve, and I'm glad Pat's at least been leaning on him. But here's an opportunity where you saw late in the game, Rice was able to get into space and run away from Colts defenders. Not this time. First half, this is a really well covered play. Is it Kenny Moore, I believe, out of the slot, man coverage, just sticking with him the whole time. Scramble drill. Pat tries to, make something out of it. Incomplete. What you will also notice here too is there's a check down in the left flat to Kareem that could have produced some damage, because Kareem against any defensive back in open space, I trust to at least make it hard for him to tackle, if not break that tackle. And so if you look in that left flat, right? If you look in the left flat, yeah, because they're playing man coverage. The strong safety. Yeah, I think they either lost him because it's only a 4-man rush here. Let's okay, so 5-man rush. Okay, so yeah, they kind of just honestly waste the running back. They kind of just say, hey, if they kind of just challenge it, right? Where the strong safety is looking at the running back, right? But he doesn't respect it, and so if Pat kind of hangs in here, just kind of sees that he doesn't really like what he sees, because there wasn't anything. This was a scramble drill, right? He didn't, the initial play was not there, turned into scramble drill mode, and it didn't work out, although it almost did, right? This could have been a huge play if not for Kenny Moore being sticky. He is a Trent McDuffie type coverage player from the slot. McDuffie's better, obviously, but in terms of just being right in your hip pocket at all times, Kenny Moore proves that a lot of the time, proves it right there. But again, it's just where it's just up and down where, I was just showing you some really good examples of Mahomes understanding, okay, it's not here, I'm going to check down. This would have been the best time to do that because the thing with with getting to the check down and not necessarily, and not necessarily risking those kind of throws we just saw, is, eventually, yeah, there's going to be a time where a defense that is making it so hard down the field on you is going to maybe mentally lapse, not respect the flat as much. And those are huge plays after the catch. Again, Kareem, was bowling dudes over, not necessarily we're expecting an explosive run after the catch, but, maybe just dragging dudes to the end zone with him on that play, potentially, at least into the red zone. All right, well, here we go. We're going to get closer to to halftime here. Just Noah Gray being Noah Gray. I think that was a good timing route. It's good to see Mahomes play with anticipation. Good timing, good anticipation, good throw. It's nice to see that every once in a while. Again, he does kind of clutch it a little bit before he throws, but hey, whatever works. And then you're going to see Kelsey here do it again. Well, although, this time he does get kind of the advantage of the guy coming, playing in soft, playing outside leverage. So, it just kind of gives him that route. But again, you love to see Pat sticking in the pocket, stepping up. You're going to see it from the end zone angle. And so that's where it does just feel like, in the first half, it was just kind of up and down at times. And even the second half, you'll see it. There are times where it shows back up. That's where, Pat's got to challenge himself to be better. And the DC for the Colts deserves a lot of credit. I'm going to keep saying that. I know I'm being repetitive. Red zone, though. Red zone alert. This is important. It does seem like in the red zone is when it seemed like it would creep in the most, what we were just talking about. And, is Noah Gray not just, if he reads this out, tight windows in the red zone, but, those mesh route, like this is kind of the whole point of running these kind of, this isn't a tradition, it is. I guess they are trying to run mesh. It just doesn't look like a traditional mesh the way they run it, and that's the Chiefs for you. Nothing traditional about what they do, but, so basically right mesh, Kelsey, I believe it's Juju right here. Is that Juju? Nope, Rasheed, excuse me. Kelsey and Rasheed running these mesh patterns, kind of running shallow underneath. And so it does do the trick of, kind of taking the attention, the eyes of the underneath defenders. And then you always have this kind of third route over the middle right here that kind of is supposed to take advantage of that, right? Where, the underneath defenders are so caught up. If it's a zone defense, right? Man, you're just hoping one of these crosses is going to outflank them like we just saw with Rasheed. But against zone, they kind of need to find space. Both of them need to settle into where the zone, windows are, like Rasheed, you see, tries to do. And he could even, kind of hit Rasheed. I mean, obviously, where he's in the pocket, not anymore. It's we'll get to the pocket presence in a second, but it's just the route combination, the route concept, I should say. You see that like Noah Gray is like it kind of works. It kind of works how it's supposed to, where excuse me. You're going to see Pat just kind of lose his footwork, and where if he would have just chilled in the pocket, not necessarily started going into scramble happy feet mode. Again, Lou Anarumo, it seems like it always happens against him in the red zone. If he would have just kind of stayed tall, read through his progressions, he probably could have fired it into Gray real quick. Gray could have got closer to the goal line in this situation. Next play. It's another play where, oh man, so close. I think, on a play like this, you really are just, it's going to be, a tight window. It's going to be closely contested. It's Sauce Gardner. So you just have to put it outside, and Pat knows that. And it was just an inside pass. The pass was too far inside. I think you can say where she should have caught it. That's fine. Like, it's a hard catch to make, but Pat absolutely should have put that, more outside. Leaving anything inside in that kind of throw is dangerous itself, right? Because, play a guy like Sauce Gardner, all of a sudden, he reaches his hands out and swallows it up with those long arms, and gets a pick. You definitely don't want that. So you always got to leave that ball outside. Pat will tell you that. Just, kind of cool to see, I guess, a back shoulder. But against Sauce Gardner, let's maybe save that for somebody else that Rasheed's going to really separate from with these red zone struggles we already have. But all right, and this is that kind of last play of the first half. Just not going to get much going, right? Not much here. And that's just kind of, a lot of the story of the red zone, where the Colts did do a really good job of how they deployed their zone defense. You're going to see their middle of the field defenders, right? Like look how bottled up that middle of the field is, where they are trying maybe, if Juju can find space, Worthy's trying to get across the field, but then you're also going to see that the pressure does kind of just, there's no chance of a play really here anyway. So, hey, it was almost a touchdown. Ref tried to give us a touchdown, right? All right, first half, there wasn't too much to love there, right? But, it got better in the second half. It was still, there's still some warts, but this team was down 20-9 and going into the fourth quarter. You got to admire the resiliency of the run game. I'm not looking at any run game from this game, honestly. Just looking strictly Mahomes dropbacks. Just because, again, we only have so much time. I've already gone 30 minutes just talking about the first half. But let's talk about the second half and actually it didn't really even get popping until the third quarter. And this is where you really saw, Mahomes is extending the play against zone defense start to pay off. And again, because what I was talking about earlier in the red zone, it's kind of harder to do maybe because there's not as much space to open up. But when you're talking about, between the 20s, excuse me, between the 20s, you're talking about Rashee Rice being able to beat zone coverage. You even heard Pat talk about it today in his press conference. He almost kind of caught himself, but he was like, yeah, we need to be better at man coverage, so we can get defenses to play zone coverage because we're much better at beating that. Like, he didn't say that, but that's kind of what he was alluding to. He's good at his coach speak, but Rashee is just, you can see how aggressively he gets passed into this. Like, look how like hard he commits to being like, all right, I got to get into the second, this second window. And not only does he get into the second window, he understands that he needs to get depth. It doesn't do him any good if Rashee comes here, gets over the middle of the field, gets in the second window, but like stays at the same level of the field he was at. You know what I'm saying? Where, midfield, right? If he just gets past him and kind of stays flat, 44 has a much better chance to cut this off. Instead, he floats away, gets depth, especially because, at that point in the scramble drill, you also understand that, people do lose eyes, people do, kind of lock onto guys. And so you can kind of understand that, like, Travarius Ward is like, oh shoot, I got to just, lock onto him. He's not even paying attention to where the ball is. Boom. Rashee Rice takes advantage of that. That's where, extending plays against zone defense, can really pay off. And again, this is the last play of the third quarter. A very underrated thing of running, they had 6 play drives that lasted 10 plays or longer. All of them ended in scores. The advantage of doing that's underrated is it tires out a defense. And I know no one wants to hear that in the age of analytics, but like, this Colts defense looked tired as the game wore on. And that's why you were able to have Mahomes, able to take deeper drops, right? Trusting Josh Simmons and Jawan Taylor, to kind of hold their own on the edge. And just kind of waiting for, guys to get open. This was a perfect example of that. And then we go back to missed opportunities. No, I honestly, there was just a string of these that I found kind of funny that, very close to some very cool plays here, that some very awesome throws where, they set this up, get the Colts in a blitz, right? They catch them. This is a perfect time, to call this play when a team is blitzing, when a team wants man coverage, because first of all, not only, obviously if you blitz, they don't have any safety help, right? The safety, they do have a safety on this one, but, you don't have as much safety help. Well, the safety here is influenced by the direction of the play, the influence of the play. And so that backside pattern, kind of running to the backside of the formation by Juju, like that's exactly how, like when you draw it up on a board, you say, all right, like the safety is going to completely lose integrity of the middle of the field. He's just going to, we're going to kind of leak out. It's almost like a leak route, right? Not exactly. A leak is more where you kind of, go more to the line of scrimmage and then pop vertical. This is more just, I don't even know what you'd call it. Just kind of a straight vertical, not vertical, right? It's he's going to the backside of the formation again, like I said. Anyway, all that to say, almost a big play. Pat gets rid of it as he's getting nailed. Man, so close. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those you just kind of chalk up and say, almost had him. And they did have to settle for a field goal on this drive. Ooh, baby. Would have been a great play. Cool Arrowhead moment. Later, another possession here. You're going to see where Pat wants to go deep. And again, the Colts deserve credit for just making this tough. Tyquan does a really good job with his route, I will say, you know, where he's going to get inside on Sauce Gardner. And look at that late separation he creates where if that ball was to be in the breadbasket, you know, that safety is coming on strong, and that's where the Colts deserve credit, where there's not much of a window here. But at the same time, you know, that late separation he gets from Sauce is pretty nice, pretty impressive. And it's cool to see Mahomes take the shot, you know, right? He notices one safety and really good footwork here, right? Clean footwork. It's amazing. When he throws it to Tyquan Thornton, it always seems to he seemed a little more confident in his throw. Just like Justin Watson in the past, or I don't want to say it's Demarcus Robinson either, but I do think there's something there where some of these auxiliary receivers, he has more comfort throwing deep for whatever reason. Here's another play that just, you know, watching the game drove me crazy. And so there's not much to review here, but just, you know, Mahomes putting it up and actually ending up, you know, because Noah Gray fights through that physical, you know, coverage on top of the route and just has his hands available. Like that's exactly what you teach your. Excuse me. Oh, geez. Talking too much here. Need some actual water here probably too. No, but you see that Noah Gray does exactly what you ask of him, right? Where fight through the physical coverage at the top of the route, kind of just have your hand, like, you know, your hands like are fighting through and naturally are available for when the ball gets there. So it's like a perfect opportunity to make a big play for Noah Gray. Watch this one though. This one was funny to me where you can tell Travis thought he had a touchdown, thought he was going to make a huge play. Notices that safety come all the way across, or corner, excuse me, the corner come all the way across with the motion. Look at Kelsey just get vertical. He kind of turns on the Jets here a little bit. But Mahomes just and Mahomes wants it. He does want it because the safety gives it to him, right? The safety is playing over to this other side. You're going to see that he's shading towards this side. Just doesn't take it. And Hollywood actually makes a great play after the catch here to get a first down anyway. But almost, could have been a big play. Watch Mahomes here. Oh, he wants it. And then he said, I'll just check it down. That's tough. You know, it's Kelsey had the step. So I would love to see him give Kelsey a shot here. So they had to settle for a field goal there. And so we're still waiting, you know, for the Chiefs to get this touchdown drive. And they put it together, I believe, or they might have, I can't remember the exact order of the plays. We got a lot of plays here. But you're just going to see on that one where Rashid did come across the field, and if Mahomes would kind of kept the pocket integrity against a three-man rush, it's three men rushing, so they have 8 in covers, not even a spy this time. So he really does, he understands that he has to stay patient. It's not going to be, coming open right away against 8 people in coverage. But and this is tough to Rashid, right? Where if he comes all the way across, you're going to see that if Mahomes kind of chills, like what I'm saying is, these underneath defenders, Rashid is getting to that kind of that second layer of the defense. If Mahomes can kind of hang in there, that is the route on this play to take. But instead, he just kind of succumbs to the sack. And then on third down, again, just trying to get a scramble drill when the Colts are kind of, beating them with man coverage. Shoot. What am I going to do? Misses Kelsey. So, as much as it's up and down, like this game, like it just feels like Pat, just every once in a while, who got him, and that's what happened here. And that's what happened on the previous play. That was a huge stop for the Colts. But then this drive was the moneymaker. And this was the play that started it all, right? Rashee Rice taking it down, having some words with the Colts coach after this. I thought that was funny. They were kind of like yelling at each other after this. But, shout out the offensive line for giving Pat the confidence, for providing the pocket, in the back of his end zone. He is, closer to the back of his end zone than the front of it, at one point in this drop, and just calmly waits for Rashee to clear. This is exactly what you want from Pat in this situation, because it creates a huge play. 44, you're going to see him, he has to respect the flat here. He has to, like, he can't hang around in the middle of the field too long. Like, he has to, release here, because that is his responsibility. Pat sees that. The flat is being, respected here, although I do think 53 could have done a much better job of understanding that 87 was not an immediate threat, could have played a little maybe tighter. But he is playing, but at the same time, I should say that he has to understand that, the route behind him could come back. He has to play underneath that. And so really, this is where you talk about like Mahomes has to wait for things that, like he has to wait for it to develop, especially when it's, 4 3-man rushes. Like it's not going to be easy right away. This was the perfect example of that, where he does wait for it to develop. He does wait for it to happen. And it works out perfectly where Rice does, his acceleration, his burst across the field, gets by Kenny Moore, gets the first down, gets way more. Oh yeah. And then, they were yelling at each other. I don't know. I just thought this was funny. He really had something with that Colts coach for whatever reason. Then we got heroic Noah Gray, saving the day here on 3rd and 8. And I say saving the day because, this play gets blown up by the Colts. Again, shout out. And it wasn't going to be a nice play. I really like the design of the play. Kind of a wasp type route. Not necessarily, but more just like a traditional post corner or, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the word for it. But anyway, so Xavier, he's releasing inside, he's releasing vertical inside, he's going. And he just wants to try to sell this as much as possible. So when he does break out, he can get that step on Sauce because this is man coverage. And so with that one high safety, with all the action, right, all this direction coming to this side of the field, he's going to be influenced. And so, on 3rd and 8, this is a really good play call, in my opinion. You get X, to try to get, over into this area of the field, right? But Sauce Gardner's there. He bottles it up. And that's why Sauce is a really good corner, one of the best in the league. And again, Sauce has that athleticism and size. Like Xavier Worthy just gets swallowed up with his size. And so there's only so much, you can do here. Obviously, as Xavier progresses, you'd like to see, the ability to maybe, not get held up so much here. And he also kind of gets double teamed because the other route here, the corner is kind of there to kind of get in his way as well. And so Pat says, oh, shoot, I got to go into scramble mode and can't get outside the pocket, can't get to the edge of the pocket, right? Because, the Colts pass rush is already bearing down. I think another nice stunt, 44 up on the line of scrimmage, gets free. Caliendo gets beat inside, right? Where Caliendo just kind of naturally goes with the guy that goes across his face and doesn't kind of keep his footwork to make sure he can catch someone that loops back around. And that's exactly what happens here is 44 loops back around. Jawan Taylor has to block the edge. And so Mahomes says, oh, shoot. Noah Gray, where you at? Boom. Even if he's knocked out conscious, which I hope Noah Gray's cool because that's not, obviously that was a little scary where Noah Gray was playing like banged up the whole game. Like you saw it, like anyone watching the game, like it felt like every time Noah Gray was in the camera, he just like looked completely worn out. That's a lot of times with Noah Gray, I will say. He does a lot of dirty work when he is in the game. He hasn't been playing as much this year as people that have watched me before understand. Juju Smith-Schuster's been taking some of those plays. But again, good on Mahomes to just give Noah Gray a shot. He makes the catch. It's 4th and 3. And this is where the real money is made. Another crosser to Rasheed. And I do think people have pointed this out by now, but it does appear. I think he is going to Rasheed because I don't think he would have not put as much velocity on the throw. But I could see where people think maybe he was wanting Kelsey, but he would have rifled it to Kelsey. He would have, stepped on his back foot and said, I'm going to Kelsey. No, he kind of the reason this ball comes out weird is because I think he recognizes, oh shit, Rasheed is open. Like I need to shoot, I should say. Excuse me. He is open right away. Like, his guy fell. I need to get the ball to him ASAP. See, like, look at that little footwork. Look at that little kind of reset with his feet. Oh shoot, Rasheed. Because I think he wants Kelsey. I think he's going to Kelsey in the first place. And then he realizes, oh, Rasheed's crossing my face. He's open. I just got to get him the ball. And he just tries to get the ball out as fast as possible. 4th and 3, right? Because it's 3 yards. He knows he just needs to catch the ball. He doesn't even need to get more yardage for where he's at. But Rasheed does his thing, gets more yardage, gets a first down. Clutch drive, clutch plays. But the red zone. We're back in the red zone where they were 1 for 6 on the day. obviously the sixth one, you know, they didn't try to score a touchdown once they got in a field goal position in overtime, but we'll get to that. Man, they just could not solve the Colts defense when they were dropping back in the red zone. And that's where, red zone defense, like, you don't have as much space to cover. The Chiefs have been doing a good job with Tyquan and Xavier Worthy of opening the middle of the field and widening, you know, the space for the receivers underneath them to work. But in the red zone, you don't have as much space to do that, right? You know, we saw Xavier Worthy on the first play, earlier in this video. I showed you Xavier Worthy do that in the red zone, but again, it's just not as easy. And here it's just not as easy, where Colts just drop into a sticky zone coverage, man. You know, it's sticky. It's sticky. You know, Pat wants to see if Kelsey can, you know, work his way open, but this corner gets good depth with him underneath, takes it away. I don't even know if that's a corner. Yeah, there's just nothing here. Trying to win the game. But he makes a play. And this is where it felt like they were going to end the game in regulation. Pat going into hero mode, scrambling out. Really good location on that ball. I mean, you don't want to put it out in front because you know, in that situation when you're scrambling, you don't really have a good peripheral of who's right in front of him. Is he going to run into somebody? But then they get stuffed up here. This was after the obvious pistol full house formation, which I will rant about that real quick. You know, a pistol, you know, hey, as a middle school coach once upon a time, I understand the beauty of pistol. Allows the running back to still get a downhill kind of forward momentum as the play starts or as the handoff starts, while the quarterback is still able to get a shotgun snap, which is a little easier for, I would say, younger quarterbacks in middle school. That's why you see it a lot, or college maybe, because you want what I just talked about, but also, you know, you want the easiness of the quarterback to see the whole defense, you know, from a shotgun type of, where you're not under center, you know, you can't see the whole field as easily. The great ones can. All that to say, their middle pistol, not only is it the running back gets the downhill, you get that fullback type of feel from the guys that line up next to him in the pistol set. You know, they're not, you know, they get the fire off, I guess. But at the same time, when you're at the goal line, you want guys at the line of scrimmage already. You know, you want them firing off from the line of scrimmage. You know, you don't want to have multiple blockers off the ball with the running back off the ball. Like, shotgun is already bad because the running back starts off the ball. So they go pistol. Like, pistol's fine, right? Because you're getting that downhill momentum at first. But you take two blockers, and I don't have the play because I'm talking about pass, but you take two blockers off the line, like tight end type players, off the line, and put them in the backfield instead of keeping them on the line. And what do you know? Someone's able to shoot through because there's not enough players on the line of scrimmage. End of rant. All right. This was after that play. And you're just going to, again, see there's not much going on. You know, they try to manufacture, you know, something across the back of the end zone where, you know, sometimes you do see the Chiefs get this where Xavier drags this safety so far up. And you see, look at his path. Look at the path he takes, right? He wants to come up because he wants the safety to come with him and leave room for Juju behind him. And the safety's not buying it. And so now it's third down. And Mahomes knows I cannot put anything in harm's way. Cannot throw an interception. We need to tie the game at the very least. And so I do think he's in conservative mode from the get-go. The Colts do a good job of just kind of playing, you know, standard zone. Xavier is the option here potentially, but that's still tight because 20 does a good job of just kind of playing both here and defluencing any sort of window right here. And Pat just takes a sack. I mean, again, you know, let's look at the pocket integrity because could he have given Xavier, let's see it right here, Xavier a throw once he sees 20 commit to going with Juju? Could he have given Xavier a throw low right here? Maybe. Still kind of a risky throw where you can't really feel or tell if Zero is undercutting this, because if Zero gets a good jump, then he could undercut it. That's where he's just playing conservative mode. Again, he doesn't want to do it. You know, he doesn't want to throw a red zone pick, doesn't want to fumble. He's like, all right, let's go to overtime. Let's beat him in overtime. And that they did. Appreciate everyone that is sticking with me. I know it's a long video, but hope everyone is learning something about the offense, learning something about the Patrick Mahomes performance. And one play that I missed that I need to get in here real quick before we get to overtime is the 2-point conversion. I was very fired up about this play because I think it was one of the first times we've seen Pat truly fire into the end zone in a while. You're going to see how the Chiefs fire up a great play to influence the Colts zone defense, widen the window for Rasheed. They're going to have a very staple play, a very staple route in their red zone package. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to leak out from the other side of the shotgun formation into the flat, into the trip side, right, where you have 3 receivers and trips. And so all these receivers are running inside, running away from the flat and influencing those defenders to come inside, to go away from the flat. And, Clyde's going to be wide open. We've seen that with Damian Williams. We've seen that with Jerick McKinnon. This is a very staple play. 44 is supposed to get caught up in the play, right? Well, that wasn't their intention, or they were showing that. But look what Rasheed does. He bends back. He's kind of, he knows that this defender is going to either play underneath and sell underneath this way, or he's going to be underneath into the flat, kind of just being, he just needs to get above this defender. He bends back and it's right there. And what a freaking throw by Pat to just say, I'm putting it right between them, not messing around. Boom, touchdown. 2-point conversion, I should say. But again, it was a good setup where they're trying to make the Colts think they're going to the flat with Clyde, and then Rasheed bends back. A unique play. Shout out whoever drew that up in the offensive team meeting. Good play to call at that time. And then we get to overtime, where there was just 3 dropbacks by Patrick Mahomes, and the first one did not look great. Was very kind of like a groaning kind of result to a play where they get to a 3 tight end look under center play action, and it works out beautifully where the Colts are so downhill minded, or kind of upfront minded with the way the Chiefs lined up, right? That's what happens when you line up under center and go into a heavy formation. Is a defense is going to have kind of more of a mentality of, okay, I need to, get downhill. I need to play the line of scrimmage. I'm not going to necessarily be, as conscious of, getting, or anticipatory, I should say, of getting into my zone drop. Just sucks that, let me change my camera here. It just sucks that Pat, or Pat and Kelsey weren't able to kind of connect on this play, because it could have been huge. Obviously the pressure here, Caliendo kind of giving way, kind of makes Pat have to throw a little awkwardly on this, but really Kelsey, he does what he does, where he's running the route he's supposed to, but once he realizes that there's more space inside than there is to keep running out here, he settles. And he just settles a little too late for Pat, because, Pat is obviously already, in the mode of getting it to him. Just like, oh man, like that could have really been a killer if they didn't, make up for it. If Pat didn't make up for it on the very next play with a very heroic, very clutch play. Shout out Xavier Worthy for securing this catch. But what you're going to get is another, creative stunt by the Colts, creative blitz by the Colts, and it almost gets them. This safety is going to come late, and Pat's taking his deep drop, and he's waiting for Xavier to get open. That's where he wants to go with the ball the entire time, and he's buying time, and he climbs the pocket, and then he realizes, oh my gosh, there's a safety coming, so I just got to get rid of this thing. And good on, because again, this throw isn't accurate. You'd love to see Pat, be able to just step up and fire this, but I think he was ready to step up and fire it. And as he was stepping up to fire it, he realized, oh shoot, that this pocket is getting, I'm about to get blown up potentially. So now he's just in get the ball to X mode. What a catch by X. Ball's behind him. But the separation he creates, and that's where we're going to go back to the wide angle here. He creates good separation here. He's off the line of scrimmage, but he just gets inside Charvarius, and you see him get that early separation that really helps, right? off the line of scrimmage right there. And that's where you got to give credit to maybe how these routes were run, where you want to be tight. You want to be tight on these routes because you're breaking away. The safety isn't, is going to be hard to, defend one or the other if he can't pick which one to go to. And I think this was a pretty good job because the spacing of routes, you don't want to be near each other once the routes are finished, but there's a lot of advantage to running your routes in a bunched way, right? They come out of a bunch formation. The routes are very bunched, and it allows Charvarius to get a little tripped up and Xavier Worthy to get his separation. Tyquan is the one running this route. And again, the risk, or maybe I didn't say this, but the risk of running, maybe a bunched route combination like this is one of them tripping up, right? And good, that's where it takes really good route running, really, good chemistry on the receivers to be able to do this and not necessarily trip themselves up. So shout out to Xavier Worthy, again, working his way across the field. Man coverage, one high, they're sending the rest of the guys. Kareem stays in the block at first, but he's releasing. And again, Pat he just kind of makes the he just kind of gets it out. Like, it's not necessarily the greatest throw, not necessarily the greatest pocket presence, where, maybe you do just kind of keep your footwork a little more. He does, he starts to run up, right? You don't necessarily have to run up. You could just kind of, hitch up and rifle it to Xavier. Instead, he does run up a little bit, but again, he knows where he's going with the ball. Xavier makes the play. But then here's where Rasheed makes a play to get them to the game-winning field goal. But I really like how they set this up, where Tripp's side against the zone defense, Hollywood is going to release inside this guy. And I really think that trips up the strong side safety here, because he is picking up someone coming across the field. And so once he sees the third, the tray receiver, the three receiver actually go inside, work his way inside, I think he just feels the need to really, go with him. He's going to naturally wide, deepen with him. He's not even going to consider the next route coming over. And 44, he's obviously, influenced by, something coming underneath. But it's almost like this guy is Hollywood was the high to the low, whereas, it looks like it should be, this is the high to Xavier's low. But it's kind of almost a double high low, and that's where it opens things up. And so shout out the Chiefs for, getting something very open to get that game-winning field goal. Give us maybe a little sigh of relief, maybe not a 55-yard game-winning field goal attempt in overtime. It was a much calmer field goal than that. And the Chiefs willed their way to victory in overtime. It was an awesome win, honestly. It was, when you remove, yourself from what the season has been or the narrative, obviously that the Chiefs are not, performing up to standard. It was just a gutsy win. All phases of the game. A lot of players played through injury. It felt like a lot of players, went out of the game with an injury, didn't even come back potentially. We obviously Trey Smith is someone that we're going to miss in Dallas, with them having Quinnen Williams now. He got banged up in this game, but just all around, just very impressive win, in my opinion, because we know they have been struggling in the red zone, and like that did not change this game. But, and I should have this pulled up for you, but I've seen the stats, and man, is it Timo Risque on Twitter that puts it out? The Chiefs are number one right now in moving the chains in the NFL on among all offenses. They keep the chains alive, they keep the chains moving as well as any team does. It's really just finishing drives, and I know that this game can change that. We just saw some great red zone designs that maybe this team just hasn't necessarily pulled out. I do think the run game, just committing to that a little harder in the red zone, with under center runs, with, getting your tight ends, maybe even again, and I've talked about this with Juju, but, maybe even in the red zone, getting in lighter formations, but still getting under center and running the ball, because, you're going to, if you have a guy like Juju, digging out an outside linebacker or a slot defender, you could still make that work. I think the Chiefs, if they figure it out in the red zone, they could be unstoppable, because they really are, so in between the 20s, they really do get it done. they get into scoring positions. They're just not finishing the drives. That has been the case the past 3 games, win or loss, Buffalo, Denver, and now here where they did get the win against the Colts. Again, just gutsy win. Thanks for everyone for joining, for watching. Long video this time. Really just was excited about, how we saw this offense, overcome Louis Anarumo as the game went on, because there were times where it felt like, oh boy, he's going to get us again. But Pat overcame it. Again, it was a lot of the run game, I think, wearing down this Colts defense. And by the end of it, Pat was playing patient and confident, and his receivers were getting open more than they were earlier in the game. So got to give credit to everyone by the end of that game, man. They all finished strong. Shout out the Chiefs for giving us some anticipation, some excitement for this Thanksgiving Day game against the Cowboys, where a win could put them at 7-5 all of a sudden, with everything in front of them. A lot of home games left against the AFC teams they need to catch up with. So let's see what we can do, Chiefs Kingdom. Again, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. You follow the site, arrowheadpride.com, where I am the contributing editor. And rewind this, B, if you missed any of it. I think I did a lot of, just if you like watching football, if you like kind of understanding what's happening on the field, I just kind of went through basically every drop back of Mahomes. Not everyone. That would have taken much longer. But a lot of the dropbacks you saw from Mahomes against Indianapolis and what happened there. So I'm going to do this every week, Tuesday night. Thank you for joining. And let me know if you have any feedback, any comments, any questions. DMs are always open. Replies are always open. Comments are always open. And if you have any recommendations for what you want to see on the show, I absolutely will break down defense at some point. Absolutely. We'll break down more than just Patrick Mahomes at some point in the pass offense. But again, it's just what, I feel comfortable talking to you all about the most, and I think I can give you all the best insight. So hopefully I did today. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it, and I will actually sign off now. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you Thursday. Have a good plate of Thanksgiving food. Go Chiefs. See you then.